I get questions from fans, friends, and family on whether this thing can really, really turn around in Jacksonville for the Jaguars. I'm going to tell you why that answer is yes, but explain it to you here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcast, man. All you got to do is tap into that location each and every day, whether you watch or listen. We'll be there. Free to subscribe to as well every single day. That's why we call our listeners everydayers, and you can be one too. Hopefully I'll give you a reason to come back here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, let me tell you what today's show is about. I've been getting a lot of questions from friends and fans, and I got to admit, my man DJ Dr. Doom is a fan, but he's like a family friend. I go back 30 years with him, and he hit me up yesterday and asked me a question that I have been getting a lot of, especially over the weekend. So I'm going to address it. What is the difference? How is this different from any other year? That's the big thing. In the third segment, I'm going to tell you there's a better emphasis on certain things. Not that big of a difference. Sometimes it's microscopic, but there's a little bit of a better emphasis on certain things, and I'll tell you what it is when it comes to player procurement. All right, the reason for optimism is what we're going to talk about in the middle. That has a lot to do with people, not words. It doesn't necessarily mean that the people who were here before were bad people. It's just that they had philosophies that I didn't think matched up with each other. But then the team kind of got lost into that, the Doug and Trent and Press, which is why I wanted a fresh start, which is exactly what we got here in Jacksonville. And I'm happy about it. And we're going to start the show telling you right now that it's only going to get better. And then your answer to that would be, T-Wig, I heard that before. We've heard that forever, that it was only going to get better. Right? I mean, it can't get worse. It has to get better. And then it gets better for a little bit, and then it goes right back to being bad. And that's something that the Jaguars uniquely have in their history. The Jaguars have never been to a Super Bowl. I'm going to count these winning seasons here in just a second. Now, I ain't do it before the show because I wanted it to be authentic and natural. 4 out of their first 5 seasons, they won games. They had one losing season. It was their inaugural. It was the first year in 1995. They then went 9-7, 11-5, 11-5, 14-2, and they were consistently one of the top teams in the AFC, if not the NFL. Then things got bad. It went 7-9, 6-10, 6-10, 5-11. Sounds like the Colts or somebody, doesn't it? Well, it sounds like the Jaguars now. And to prove my point, after 4 mediocre years, then they go 9-7, and then they go 12-4, and it's like, uh-oh, we're building something. And then they go 8-8, and then they went 11-5. These are the years when they were doing the Jack Del Rio Watusi of being really good, not good, good one week, not good the next week, and you can tell by these records. And then in 08, 09, and 010, it's 5-11, 7-9, and 8-8. They had started to morph into the Tennessee Titans. And yeah, I'm taking shots at those teams in our division because I just can, right? They started to be 7-9 and 8-8 every year like Jeff Fisher. Then it got ugly. It got 5-11, and then the bottom fell out, and they were 2-14 in 2012. After that, you go 4-13, 3-13, 5-11, 3-13, and the fans are like, "What the hell?" They went 10-6 with Jacksonville, and everybody thought that was the greatest team that ever walked the earth because those lean years had gone on for like a decade, right? You get one little scent of having a good team, and this city lost their mind. And I think a lot of those players did too, because the very next year they went 5-11. And then things started to break up. And then Jalen wanted to get out of here, and Bortles was gone, and Fournette was hanging out with people that they didn't think he needed to be hanging out with, and he wasn't cutting back, and he was always hurt. Didn't have great vision, according to people. So they went 6-10 in 2019, and then we thought the bottom went. Man, we thought we bottomed out at 4-12 or 2-14 in 2012. Them suckers went 1-15 in 2020. Might have been one of the worst teams I've ever seen in the National Football League, including those Cleveland Browns teams that everyone knows was awful, right? And now we get past that, and then we enter this Doug Peterson era. And I know I'm going through this like y'all wasn't even there, right? But that's not really why I'm doing it. I'm really doing it for emphasis. And this is the point that we'll make in segment number 3. Yeah, I see this for what it is, because it takes your emotions on a roller coaster. In 2021, after that terrible season, they were 3-14. That's Urban Meyer year, all right? That's first year Trevor, and you talking about a roller coaster. We get the first pick, they hire Urban Meyer, everybody's here, and as soon as that thing starts to, as soon as they pull that car out of the garage, man, you hear that clinking, and then it just went downhill. Probably to a low that we probably weren't at our lowest point as an organization, but I think the ownership and management was at their lowest point as an organization, because this is the first time they made a real big public mistake in front of everybody when everybody should have been cheering. But I'm going to show you, they went 9-8 in Doug Peterson's first year, and once again, it felt like the football gods had shined down on Jacksonville. They went 9-8 in 2023, a year after that, and it felt like a failure. Expectations, things change. You can get me here, but can you take me there? Doug Peterson got one more year to prove it, and they went 4-13, and that's why the Jaguars made a change, and here we are. Changed. New, with new clothes on. Sunday's best, right? It's only going to get better because it can't get worse. But I'm going to give you a true reason for optimism about getting better. And I'm going to warn you. Sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. In fact, we've seen examples, and I just mentioned them, where it kind of happened overnight and then it went away overnight. I want to talk more about the foundation that makes this thing sustainable, the reason for my optimism. I'll tell you what it is in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is brought to you and sponsored by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. That's right, man. As a small business owner, and I've done it 3 times, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. That's the hashtag hiring frame. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high energy hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Breaking it down here on Locked On Jaguars here, as OTAs will continue this week. It's supposed to rain real bad Thursday, but I'm gonna brave it up. I mean, the rain ain't my kryptonite. We're going out to OTAs and making an appearance the first couple of weeks of OTAs. I was out of the country celebrating my anniversary, and then the week before that, I buried my uncle, so I wasn't able to get out and watch practices, but I'm going to get out there so I can give you some insights. I'm giving you insights right now as to why I believe the Jaguars have a serious reason for optimism. It's not just because they made a complete change. It's because they made a complete change and did not keep people they were familiar with just for the sake of familiarity. You just can't ever fertilize and water a problem and think it's going to turn into a solution. You just have to be solution-based. This is what you've heard from the new staff. On that thumbnail, if you're watching this audio, you probably see a picture of Travis Hunter, James Gladstone, and Liam Cohen. Somebody else is very central to that, and that is Tony Bacelli. But Bacelli was here prior to Even though he was in a different role on radio, he was in the building. But he has as much to do with how I envision the future being and getting better than any of those three new additions. And I'm going to tell you why. Because of personal conversations. And I'm not going to divulge over the years the things that Tony and I have talked about. He probably won't even remember, but he probably will once you hear it, because he'll say, yeah, I think I did say that. But it wasn't more or less a quote as much as it was being around him and the idea of the very things that we could all identify. I'm just going to speak for myself, that I could identify that was wrong with this team fundamentally. We just stoked conversation up and boom, it would pop right out of his mouth. And because I was just sitting there thinking, like, I know I'm not crazy that it's that obvious. And in those conversations, and just very, very casual, not interviewed, Tony, we consider each other acquaintances. You would hear all of the things that were obvious, but weren't easy, but things that needed to be addressed. Now, it doesn't mean that the past regimes weren't addressing those things. And it doesn't mean that they didn't know it. They were doing the best job that they could. And this is why I always said it was never personal with anyone. It's because the job just wasn't good enough, and the record showed that. Not only the record, but the pattern of losing and the pattern of not being able to get out of your own way. And sometimes during our job, you would search for answers and you wouldn't get them. You know why you wouldn't get them? It's not even the need to know basis aspect. You wouldn't get those answers because the people who had to give them to you didn't even know. So this goes back to the conversations that we've had. It doesn't mean they didn't understand it, but they didn't know how to express it. They didn't know how to extract it from players. They didn't know how to get it out of coaches. They didn't know the buttons to push. They didn't know any of that. And I'll tell you one of the central reasons why, and it's because of conversations that I've had. Everyone always had this old school mentality of players. Yeah, we'll get them in here. We'll shape them, mold them into our image, and then we'll put it out on the field. What is our image? When people always say the Jaguars don't have a culture, they were expecting to bring all of these people in here, blend them and mold them in together, and the common thing being their football talent. But what was the culture that you were trying to ingratiate them into? The one that you're trying to actually create and figure out? How can you build something and ingratiate people into it when they don't even know what it is and what the expectation is? And I know it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, they're grown men. They can come to work and do their job like everyone else. I think they did their job. They did what everyone asked them to do. Maybe some of the things that they were being asked to do, like rotate in and out and gain weight on the defensive line, were just the wrong things to do. And you need a real grown-up in the room. And when I say grown-up, I don't mean an old person. I don't mean somebody who's been around a long time. It could be a young person like James Gladstone, like Liam Cohen, like Tony Bacelli, who's relatively young when it comes to NFL execs. That's what it just takes a person that understands how to communicate, who can stretch perspectives. And then they come up with this thing, and it's this saying, and it keeps ringing in my head. And I'm going to tell you why it resonates with me a lot. The saying where what James Gladstone says, and it's amazing that I missed this, when he says, we want people that we go out and get them that are intangibly rich, and all they have to do is come here and be nothing more than themselves. So I kept saying, what the hell is he talking about? I even looked up intangibly rich. I asked him about it, and he laughed, and he said, hey, man, we even got media people trying to figure out what that is right now. So instead of worrying about what his definition of it is, I use context. The second part, when he says, to be nothing more than themselves, grabs me. It's because I think James Gladstone is one of the most unique individuals we've ever seen here with a microphone, especially. And it's unique in a way that while it sounds sometimes it can sound a little bit rehearsed. Sometimes it could sound a little cliche, but at least it's his cliche. And at least it's his voice. And it's not the voice of people talking about things that they've never experienced, because he has. Liam Cohen understands that language. Tony Bacelli was blown away by that language, the EVP. Shad Khan was obviously blown away about it. And he was blown away by Liam Cohen. And then when we met Greg Udinski, we were blown away about him. Could it be that football ain't that much different from team to team and from coach to coach and player to player? Could it really be that the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things about making something work, is communication? Good communication, because communication can be good and bad. It could be stellar and it could be poor. I think we've seen poor. If you've had poor messaging coming from coaches to players, you wouldn't think that the same way coaches deal with media, they deal with players, because coaches come up and stand up talking about we're going to protect our players. But when Doug Peterson told someone last year, after being asked a question after a game, I'm not getting into that because you ain't going to understand it anyway. I wonder how many times that's come out of his mouth when he was dealing with players, or maybe not like that. But when a player may have asked, why are we doing this way, for clarity's sake and trying to understand, can you imagine the person that actually explained that, to try to explain that to a player, to a 22, 23-year-old player, when he spoke to a 40-something-year-old grown man with kids in college that way? No. People show you who they are, and you teach people how to treat you. And I'm telling you right now, anybody that has the gumption to stand up and speak like that to the media, no matter how much of a nice person you think they are, that means that when they're in the fire, and trust me, standing behind that microphone is fire. Standing there on Sunday knowing the whole world is watching you is fire. Standing there when all of these fans are looking at you is fire. It's hot. They don't seem to really communicate well. And they kind of shut down. And Trent told everybody, we do this for real. I've told people you do this for real, but I'm not a person that does it for real. So guess what? I ain't the one that should be saying that. It's like a dude who's 6'4", always walking around talking about he's 6'4". Let other people, we see your tall behind, and we'll tell you you're 6'4". You ain't gotta, when you start saying you 6'4", when you start calling out your own stats and you naming your resume when people are asking you questions, you already lost. Because we're asking you the question because the record is terrible, Trent. We're asking you the record, Doug. We're asking you why, Doug, because we want to know, because I don't even think you know. So when they go out and say that they're going to get people to come here and be nothing more than themselves, that's the culture, man. That's it right there. They make sure whoever they bring in here is a football playing Jesse who all he wants to do is work and maybe go fishing and maybe have one person that he deals with in his wife when he's 22 years old, and not have people think it's weird because a dude wants to work his butt off and come home to one person and go fishing. Or a dude that was in the Naval Academy running around playing while he had to honor, the commission that he was going to get from the Navy and get permission. He's in the Naval Academy. That kind of stuff shows you the kind of integrity. He could do that and play high enough level football that he gets noticed. The intangibly rich thing is not going out and getting talented people and bringing them in here and putting them in a car wash. It's going getting people that's been put through a car wash and bringing them here, and they're clean already. And then you shape and mold them a little bit, because all you're asking them to do is be themselves. That part, the themselves, is the culture. Because you do the hard work of properly vetting people, not in an environment like the combine, not at a whole bunch of these workouts like other teams, but talking to the guidance counselors and the security guards and the third grade teacher and the cafeteria lady. And then the campus police. Not that you ever got arrested, but does he park his car? Was he ever rude to you? And this is why when everybody keeps asking me, saying, Wig, I don't know if it's going to work. I think that kid's going to want to get out of here after 3 or 4 years. Travis Hunter is not Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey didn't want to leave. I'm trying to tell y'all that, and you won't believe me, but he didn't. He wanted to leave because of the people. He didn't want to leave because of the city and the fans. Trust me, did not. He wanted to leave because of the people in that building. Most of all, who 99.9% of them are gone, but that was his issue. Travis ain't going nowhere, man. The reason for optimism is Gladstone and Cohen sound just like Bacelli sounded, but Bacelli was talking to me 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. They finally got that alignment. They finally understand that just like you don't make players stronger here, you don't create character. You can shape and mold it and build it a little bit, but you don't create character. You go draft it. You go draft talented character, and I think that's what they've done. Better emphasis. What do we mean by better emphasis? I'll tell you in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. We've always talked about what do they lead with? What do the Jaguars lead with? In the past 4 years or so, maybe 5, it sounds like they lead with physical traits. It sounds like they lead with versatility. It sounds like they lead with standing behind the promise of an arm of a young quarterback that needs you to insulate him, but that you kind of leave him out there on his own. It sounds like the Jaguars used to lead with people that Trent Baalke was comfortable with. Isn't it funny how this goes? That when you're emphasizing physical traits as opposed to the other stuff, and then you expect everyone to come in here and line up in a certain way. And when I say character, I don't mean people who aren't good people. I just mean people who are aligned with the other people on the team and who are aligned with the vision of the organization. They struggled with that in the past because they say we didn't have a culture. Well, maybe what we didn't have was we didn't have a vision that had a plan as opposed to something that was a dream. Well, now they got like-minded people in. They know exactly what they're going to do. And I'm not telling y'all it's going to work, but the reason why I think it's going to work, because the only way something can work is everybody has to be on the same page from the very beginning, and the message has to be clear. That's why I think it's different. It's all about what they lead with. They lead with alignment. They lead with accountability. Be on time. They say being late is the worst thing that you can do to them because it disrespects the coaches and it disrespects the teammate. You damn right. And that sounds harsh, but it doesn't sound harsh in a way because it doesn't sound raspy and it doesn't sound like a threat. It's the truth. You don't have to always threaten people, and you don't always have to. I got stories of people, guys that didn't eat certain foods, and Trent told them they didn't want it bad enough. Instead of saying, okay, let's figure out how you can get the things that you need based on our list here, but you don't want to put certain things in your body that we serve. I remember I asked the guys, he said he was hungry. I said, what do you mean you're hungry? They got a cafe in there. He was complaining. He said, man, I don't put a lot of that stuff in my body. And I'm thinking, like, they got bad food. He was like, not really. You remember Josh Allen stood up and asked them why they had a certain type of water and said the water was crazy? It's stuff like that I'm talking about. It wasn't about water. It was about food, but it's stuff like that. And it was stuff like a dude being told that because he didn't want to consume certain foods that he wasn't going to make it, probably. The dude ended up making it somewhere else, by the way. But that's my point. The point is what do you lead with? You can't lead with what you think people should be or what you want them to be. Man, you got to set that example. And for too long, the Jaguars, they were searching for answers of what the identity and the culture of this team was going to be. And weren't really offering any thing up. He was okay. We're just gonna go out here. We're just gonna be traits. We're gonna get as many big, tall, fast people as we can, and we're gonna impose our will on everybody else. So explain to me how you gonna impose your will on everybody else when you, after year 3, admitted that y'all weren't big and physical enough, and it was you who was supposed to make them big and physical, and then you said you don't make them big and physical. You draft them that way, but you obviously didn't because they did not end up big and physical. This is the stuff that I'm saying. What do you lead with? I'm optimistic about this new organization and this new administration because they ain't going to leave you guessing. If they don't leave you guessing, they won't leave the players guessing. They're looking for solutions. They're providing answers pre-snap. Have you ever heard anybody say that they want to provide answers pre-snap to make things easier? No, you heard them say, he's your franchise quarterback. It's supposed to be hard. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And then the Jaguars go out and get the physical freak in Travis Hunter. And as it turns out, they got traits anyway, didn't they? But what they also got was a really, really good football player who's going to play a position where their best football player already plays. If this ain't making the real nice, shiny part of your car even that much better and hoping that this thing lifts up because you're just putting a whole bunch of people that love football. I'm telling you, man, it's different because they got Brian Thomas Jr. and they got Travis Hunter together, and they got a quarterback that's going to be equipped with more resources. They understand that you got to be about blocking people. You just can't talk about it. So they go out and throw bodies on the offensive line that are big and physical. And then just this week, coming up later on this week, there's a round table Thursday. Offensive coaches, defensive coaches, where they're just going to be transparent and talk to us, the media. Just because they're doing that and other people didn't do it doesn't mean that they're getting favor from me about what their process is. I'm giving them favor about what their process is because they're willing to sit down and be transparent because they're sure about who they are and they don't have anything to hide. You also won't find anything hidden on Locked On NFL Scouting with my man Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino. They make you a smarter NFL fan, and it is a podcast dedicated to all of the players on the roster. Learn everything you want and can about those teams and players by listening to Locked On NFL Scouting wherever you get your podcast. All right, man, we're here every day. Ain't no summer. 5 days a week, Locked On Jaguars, each and every day here for you, the Jaguar fan, all the way through training camp and up until the start of the season. We'll see you tomorrow here on Locked On Jaguars. Y'all take care.